enjoyed that video, and hopefully you're kind of scratching your head and thinking, okay, well, that looked kind of convincing. It did look like a UFO, didn't it? So now that you've seen a pseudoscientific explanation, right? The idea that, that maybe we don't know what happened. Maybe we've been visited. It's inexplicable. I wanted to share with you. Okay. For some reason, Discovery Channel has pulled down its documentary that showed an analysis of video evidence. So I'm going to take us to the ever popular Wikipedia, because they've actually done a really good job of compiling all the stories and things. You're going to see a lot of really interesting things here. Actually, I actually had that in the right place to start with. So one interpretation, the pseudoscientific interpretation, is that we have a UFO that hovered and flew and did all this stuff over Phoenix. A place called Cogitech did an analysis of the video footage from that night of the lights that were hovering over Phoenix, not the V-shaped formation. Because like I said, there was no video footage of the V-shaped formation flying across the state. They found a video that was a really good, and you saw the actual footage in that piece that you watched. They found that really good stable position. And they used that as the video for the lights. And then they went back out to the same location and they videotaped there during the daytime. And then they went back to Cogitech and they had the computer put one frame from the daytime footage aligned and overlapped with one frame from the nighttime footage. And the computer lined them up to make sure that the things in the foreground were lining up correctly. So all the perspectives were exactly correct. So everything got lined up correctly. And then they ran, once every frame had been paired up with another frame from daytime, so that now we can actually see those Sierra Estrella Mountains that are in the foreground, or that are in the picture. We can actually answer the question that a lot of the witnesses are arguing. The witnesses are saying those lights were in front of the mountains. Those lights were hovering over Phoenix, which would mean they were in front of the mountains. Cogitech's analysis showed that the lights were actually behind the mountains. And the way that we know that is that they were actually very, 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 very slowly dropping in the sky. They were very, very, very slowly losing altitude. And the reason why they appeared to sort of blink out in random patterns is because what Cogitech was able to show is that the flare would blink. I just revealed the solution. The light would blink out just as it reached the peak of whatever point they were on those Estrella Mountains. And because they're mountains, because they're jaggedy, sometimes there's a higher point over here and sometimes there's a higher point over there. And so the lights were blinking out in what appeared to be a random pattern. Let's go back to our little lights here. So that in every single case with every single light, the light would go out as it reached the tip of the mountain that was below it. And never did it ever descend down below the level of the mountain, which would mean it was not in front of the mountain. It had to be behind the mountain. So what would account for that? Well, I revealed it a second ago. They were flares. So that V-shaped formation that was traveling across the state is probably the Maryland Air National Guard that had been first sent to Air Force Base in Nevada, and then was sent from that Air Force Base to an Air Force Base in Arizona, in southeast Arizona, where they then launched to drop flares for night maneuvers that the Army National Guard was conducting on the ground west of the Sierra Estrella Mountains. So I'm giving you like all this scientific context, right? Things we know. So here are the mountains, right? So the Air National Guard had flown down to the southeast corner of Arizona during that first pass, between 8:15 and 8:45, got their stuff together, coordinated with the group that was going to be doing their night maneuvers over here on the west side of the mountains. The Air National Guard takes off, drops their flares. The flares are, when you drop the flares, they have parachutes above them. And so they are already going to fall pretty slow because they have parachutes. And then, of course, the flares are generating heat. And so that gives them even extra lift. And so the reason why the lights looked like they were hovering is because they were being held aloft by the parachutes. So after all of this Phoenix Light stuff started coming to the forefront, the Air National Guard said, well, we were doing night maneuvers and we had dropped flares to illuminate the night maneuvers. And that's what that was. That was flares. And they were behind the Estrella Mountains. They weren't in front of it and all that. But you'll notice it's still not clear to people, right? So look at all this evidence that's here. What was the wind direction? What's going on? So the Air National Guard explanation makes the most sense. The Cogitech analysis of the video footage explains exactly what people were perceiving versus what was really happening. And yet, we still have so many people who think it was a UFO invasion. I mean, a new, here, it's right down here, a new documentary came out called Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. There's a documentary now based on that, and it's got this doctor, MD woman, who she's like, I'm a skeptic, but I'm a believer now because there's no way it could be anything other than a UFO. So here we have even a really well-trained scientist who's like, it's got to be a UFO. Like, that's the only interpretation that's possible. People really are intrigued by these Phoenix Lights. Why? Why can't they just accept that the Air National Guard dropped flares and you were seeing a series of flares that look like an arch because of, distance and other things, and look like they were hovering because of how slowly flares drop when they have parachutes. But why can't we just accept that? Well, because it's not very fun. It's just not. Mystery is much more interesting than just straight interpretation of facts. It just is. And so people really would like it to be something else, right? They would just really like it to be something else. The idea that the government would lie to us and not want us to know that there had been a UFO. And so, of course, they would tell us that the Air National Guard had been doing that because that would be a good cover. And, it's way more interesting. It's just way more fun. So one reason why we believe pseudoscientific claims like UFOs have visited us or things like that is because mystery is fun. What about pseudoscientific claims like that a psychic can tell you about your future or tell you about your own personality, or that astrology could tell you about your own personality or things like that? How can we explain that kind of pseudoscientific claim and why people are willing to go to psychics and get their futures read or go to an astrologer and find out what they should really be doing for a career and these kinds of things? Why do people do that? Well, the Barnum effect will explain a lot of these kind of psychic and astrological beliefs, because they generate, those kinds of sources tend to generate descriptions that are general enough that it's almost believable, right? It's like, it's general, but then we think we're a little bit unique in having those characteristics. So then we think, well, it does sound like me. And we kind of forget that it kind of sounds like everybody. In fact, I'm going to have you guys do a little test of the Barnum effect in your weekly exercise. And what you'll have your friend do is take this personality inventory, which actually is the Big Five inventory. So it actually is a personality inventory, but it has a little twist, because no matter what they click as their answers to these 46 questions that they're going to take, they're all going to get the same personality profile. So the profile is going to say you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage. Disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside. You prefer a certain amount of change and variety and become dissatisfied when hemmed in by restrictions or limitations. You pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept others' statements without satisfactory proof. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself. At times, you have serious doubts as to whether you have made the right decision or done the right thing. At times, you're extroverted, sociable, while at other times, you're introverted, wary, reserved. While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. The great thing about this profile is that it's general enough that it is going to describe most people, right? But then it's got like a little bit of what a lot of us like to think is unique to ourselves aspects to it, right? Like the idea that, we tend to be critical of ourselves. We kind of think we do it to ourselves more than other people do, right? Or that we are extroverted and sociable sometimes, but then other times we feel introverted and wary and reserved, right? That we think, well, that's unique to me, when in fact it's really common to a lot of people. And so it'll be fun to see if whoever you can recruit to participate in this actually feels like this profile describes them. And so hopefully you'll have fun administering it and things, but it's a good illustration that one of the reasons why people believe in astrologers or in psychics and things like that is because they make statements that are general like this. Now you'll notice we're like kind of undermining psychology in your friends' minds, right? Because we're like, here, take my psychology personality scale. And then we give you this fake result. I hope they won't conclude that all personality inventories are equally useless. But we do need to be a little bit careful about personality inventories. Man, there's a million of them on the internet, aren't there? Where you can, I just saw one recently where you were shown 4 different rings and you were supposed to click on the one that you like the best. And now it's supposed to give you a personality inventory based on which, or a personality profile based on which ring you picked. Okay, that can't be any more random, can it? I've seen ones based on, you get to pick from some colors, or a lot of them, they move through social media and they're kind of fun to take, but they also can be, I don't know. I think sometimes people think they might be valid. They're not. They're just I sometimes wonder if I do them on Facebook, if they're actually analyzing my stuff I've posted on Facebook or other things, or if they're just randomly picking a report to give me. I mean, I literally can't tell. But if you like the report, it's much more likely that you'll think it's valid than if you don't like the report. That's for sure. For sure. Oh, there was a fun one that I did in a magazine recently, and it was, you're supposed to say what kinds of things you like to do, and it'll tell you what breed of dog you should have. And I actually thought it was kind of fun, because it was actually kind of interesting, because I clicked on, it asked what kind of car do I have and all these different things that were just objective things that I do and have. And then it told me that the breed of dog that I actually have is the breed of dog that I should have. And I thought, well, that was kind of coincidental. I'm not sure. Like, I don't even know what the options of dog breeds were going to be. Like, maybe that was the only dog breed everybody got. I have no idea, but it was kind of weird that, I have the dog that they say I should have based on the other things I like and do and have. But see that? I'm like, that was kind of weird, because guess what? It gave me an answer that I'm like, see, I was right to have this kind of dog. A little pseudoscientific of me, wasn't it? But it fit my expectations, so it must be correct. And that's the Barnum effect, right? It fit my expectations, so it must be correct. All right. So yeah, we believe it because it's fun and things like that. What kind of evidence do pseudoscientists rely on? Obviously not scientific evidence. So what do they rely on? Well, they rely really heavily on testimonials. A lot of times pseudoscientists are trying to provide us with some kind of solution to something. And so a lot of times they will get satisfied users to tell you how much it solved the problem, right? So here we have Laura, who says, by taking Proactol and having a radical diet change, I began losing weight at the rate of 6 pounds per week. Well, that's good. So we have a user reporting that the treatment worked for them. Classic testimonial. So by taking Proactol and having a radical diet change. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I would have felt better about the effectiveness of Proactol if all she had done is taken Proactol and it did this to her. I wouldn't have believed it, but it would have felt better. And then I don't like her saying she lost a weight at the rate of 6 pounds a week. That doesn't sound right either. But the premise with a testimonial is that you're supposed to say, wow, I want to lose 6 pounds a week. Wow, maybe the Proactol allowed her to have this radical diet change, right? Where it gave her willpower or something like that. And that's what we're hoping will happen with a testimonial. That maybe you'll look at Laura and you'll say, wow, I want to look like that. Or she seems like somebody like me, or these kinds of things, so that you'll think, wow, it'll probably work for me also. Testimonials are probably the most effective type of advertisement. The best type of testimonial is to get a famous person to say that it worked for them. Because for some reason, we always think that if it worked for them, it'll probably work for us too. So testimonials are really powerful kinds of evidence, and we consumers tend to believe them quite frequently. The things I want us to think about with regard to testimonials is that let's say that it's true that Laura lost 6 pounds a week. Okay, let's just grant that what she's saying is true. It's possible that this change that she's experiencing is due to, for example, spontaneous remission. I don't know. Maybe she was carrying around her extra, like we call it baby weight, right? When you haven't reached full adulthood yet. And so you have like a little extra baby weight. And then when you reach full adulthood, then you lose that and your face gets thinner and other thoughts. Maybe she was about to spontaneously remit that baby weight anyway. And she was about to just have this, sort of physiological change. And it had nothing to do with Proactol, that the diet change might have happened naturally anyway, because maybe her appetite was about to shift anyway. And that this was just going to happen on its own. That whatever her problem was about to go away anyway. Now, I'm not going to bother to make you guys watch this in the playlist, but I usually in class like to do this really quick little 6-second thing where this is from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and they're about to burn this woman at the stake for being a witch, and the guy there in the middle says, "She turned me into a newt," and then everybody looks at him like, "Wait, what?" And then he goes, "Well, I got better." I got better, right? So it's spontaneously remitted. I became a newt, but I'm no longer a newt, right? Sometimes it just goes away. Whatever your problem is may just go away. And so if we think back to that alternative cancer treatment that we had been looking at, it's possible that some people who have undergone the treatment that they're talking about have actually gotten better. And so it might look like they got better because of the treatment, but it might have gotten better because it was going to spontaneously remit anyway. I mean, stuff like that can happen medically or other ways. And so things just go away. And the last thing you tried before it went away, you go, "Oh, look, it cured me." But the truth is it was just spontaneous remission. Another way that a person's outcomes might change and not be due to the treatment at all, but just their outcome changed, is a statistical thing that we call regression toward the mean. So let's imagine that you've got the population mean, the average score that the average person would get. And you've got the person who you actually measured, and they're over here outlying away from the mean. So they're in that light blue shaded area. So they're away from the mean. They're what we call an outlier. Just by testing in them again later, those people who were initially scoring in the extreme area will tend to be closer to the mean just by being tested again. So we have where it would have been with no regression, we would expect the same score again. But due to regression toward the mean, we see that they've moved a little closer to the mean. It has nothing to do with the treatment. It just is a fact that usually when you're an outlier, you become less radical over time. You tend to normalize. Your behaviors, your outcomes tend to get closer to the mean over time. An example that you might relate to is if you were ever the highest score in class or you were ever the lowest score in a class, you probably on the next measurement moved closer to the mean. So if you had the highest score on midterm 1, on midterm 2, maybe you weren't the high scorer anymore. Maybe you moved a little closer to the mean. Now, there could be a lot of factors for why you might have moved closer to the mean. It could be that you didn't study as hard as you did the first time because you're like, right on, I'm the top scorer, and you relaxed a little bit. It could be that the other participants in the group were like, oh no, that's the score to beat. And they all amped up their studying and they caught up to you, got closer to you. There are a lot of different factors. It could be that the teacher altered the type of material. And so what had been really like logical for you to answer on the first test, now it's like, oh wait, I'm not getting this as much on the second test. I mean, there are a lot of factors that could contribute to why the score would regress. But what I'm arguing is that the score might regress and have nothing to do with the treatment that we think is causing the regression, right? We might think that Laura is weighing less now because of Proactol, but it might be that she was just regressing towards the mean. Maybe other people in the population had gained weight around her, and so her weight doesn't seem as high. Maybe, like I said, she was going to lose weight anyway because of spontaneous remission, and so that caused her to regress towards the mean. There's just a lot of factors that could cause the score to change that have nothing to do with the treatment. So this whole discussion was assuming that the person actually had a change, right? The other issue with testimonials that can be problematic is, so here we're talking about we don't know why it might have worked for them. Here, we're going to complain about the actual just use of testimonials as evidence. When we hold up a testimonial and we say, look how well our product worked for our consumer, we don't test any other competing explanation. We don't look at the possibility of regression towards the mean, or that it was the radical diet change that was the important thing for Laura's weight loss, not the Proactol. We don't test any of that as a pseudoscientist. We just say, look, it worked for Laura. We don't use a control group. We don't randomly assign participants to condition. So here we have Proactol. We have people who are motivated to lose weight to the point where they're willing to buy this medication that they think will boost their probabilities. So no random assignment. We only have, volunteers who have chosen to take the medication or the treatment. And then we don't have any control group of people who are at all like them who are not doing the treatment, right? Like we don't have a control group of people to compare to. So I don't know, maybe the entire population was going to be losing weight at that rate anyway, and it had nothing to do with people who taking Proactol or not. Maybe there was just a food shortage. I don't know, that caused everybody to lose weight. And had we had a control condition, we would have been able to show it's not about Proactol because look, the controlled condition had the exact same effect, right? So we need control groups to make sure that we know what's causing the effect, the treatment or something else. And we need random assignment to make sure that we don't only have the most motivated people using the treatment. And then we have the issue of the placebo effect, right? I'm sure you guys have all heard of placebos and the idea that we give you an inactive treatment and see if it's just as effective as the active treatment, right? Our brains are quite powerful and they can convince us that we have gotten a treatment when we really haven't. It can actually mask symptoms and do all sorts of stuff for a time. It probably won't permanently cure us, but it can, for a time, make us feel better or get rid of effects. So placebo effects might be the explanation for, the changes that we see in participants. And the thing is, without a control group, we can never eliminate placebo effect as an explanation. Like maybe Laura took her Proactol and she just believed it was giving her better willpower. And that's what allowed her to restrict her caloric intake and lose 6 pounds a week, right? Like maybe it was a placebo effect. Here's a guy shopping for placebos, or should he get the extra strength placebos, right? So placebos might explain the outcome. The final thing I wanted to say as far as testimonials being poor evidence is that we can't always trust the source. It's possible that this person who's providing the testimonial never even used the medication or the treatment, that they're being paid to say the things that they're saying. And so they're willing to say whatever needs to be said because it's just a job for them. And they're not concerned at all about the fact that you might be making your judgments based on the things that they're saying. You can't always trust the source. So I'm going to let you run off into the playlist to see this outrageous example of a so-called testimonial person who apparently has no compunction about lying about all of her qualifications or circumstances. So enjoy that video, and I'll see you in the next segment.